Today we have Moreno Kafo. She's based in Lagos, Nigeria. She works with GitHub as a contractor via Andela. She's a technical support engineer and she helps their premium customers navigate technical issues they have using GitHub premium products. She has been working with GitHub for 4 years. So before we get into, I googled GitHub. I saw what they do, but I didn't really understand. I didn't really get, they're a group of programmers. I don't know if it's open source they work on or not, but I'll ask a few questions about that. Sure. So let's have a bit of your background, your family, childhood, how it was like then. And are there any things you learned growing up that directed your paths, your career paths?
So I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria, and I schooled from nursery to secondary school was in Lagos, and then my university was in Delta State. So growing up, I was like every other child that thought one of the best occupation out there is banking because they store money. And so you would have access to money. So I remember that I wanted to be a banker. If you ask me as a child, I would say I want to be a banker when I grow up. But when I got into secondary school, I still wanted to be a banker. And so when I had to choose what class to go to in senior secondary, I went for commercial. I was, they have this mock exam that you write, and based on my results, I was asked to go to sciences, but I insisted that I wanted to be in commercial class because my dream was to be a banker then. So because I insisted, I went to commercial class, and then I loved the subject economics. And as a result, I decided that I wanted to study economics in university. And that was what I ended up studying. So I did not really have any interests in the sciences until after secondary school. I didn't even have any exposure to it until after secondary school. After secondary school, I wanted to do a program, and I told my dad then that I would like to do something while waiting to get into school. And I did desktop publishing. So desktop publishing, you learn things like Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, a little bit of graphic design. So I had that exposure as a teenager. I was around 15, 16 years old then. So I knew how to use a computer. I was computer literate. I did very well with the program. But also, at that point, I still didn't know much about programming. I didn't know much about software. I was computer literate. I knew how to use the computer. So that was my earliest exposure to computer as a teenager.
How did you get into programming?
Yeah, I went into university. I studied economics. I graduated with 2-1, did very well. And then after university, I met my current husband, who was my friend at the time. He told me about programming. So I had a 1-year period to wait before NYSC, and I wanted to be productive that period. So he mentioned that I could do a program. I could do software. I could do something in software. Since I already had a bit of exposure to using a computer, I felt it was something I could try. I didn't know the prospects. I wasn't aware of what I would do with it. I just needed something to occupy my time at that period, and I felt it was something that I could, try out. And well, that was the beginning of my journey into programming. So I did a training in Lagos here for a couple of months, and then I had to go serve. So while I went to serve, they had this subsidized program, NYSC programs. And so I also chose something in the line of programming. And, I continued learning. I did a lot of self-learning during that period. I was constantly, the beautiful thing about programming is you can always find resources on the internet. So because I had exposure and I had people who were guiding me in the right direction, I knew where to look, what to look for, and I was constantly growing, improving in my skills in that area. So yeah, after secondary school, it was my first real exposure to software programming, and I started learning after university, not after secondary school. So I started learning after university. It was at some point I decided to, leave everything, and this was while I was 7. I made a decision, a very conscious decision, to forget about my degree, my economics degree. Prior to that, I had been preparing for interviews. My dream was to work in an auditing firm like KPMG, PwC, and I was already preparing in that line. But as soon as I started programming, I knew that I loved what I could do. I knew all the things, all the things that I could do with programming, were things that I was interested in. And so I made that conscious decision that I had to choose, because I had to focus on one, because I had zero to no background when I was getting into it. I knew there was a lot in front of me. Yeah, so I consciously decided that I would stop everything that had to do with my degree and focus in this other career path.
For a lot of people like myself, I tried a bit of programming. I'm more visually, I have visual, I'm interested in the visual arts kind of. I do photography now, so video, animation. So there was a time in between careers. I said, okay, let me try web programming, since I like visual art, like the graphics side. I like the graphics side of art.
Mm-hmm.
It was really difficult. It was very difficult. So I had a tutorial I was going through. I was learning JavaScript, which is front end for web programming, and the coding was so difficult that, and the lady, why, when I knew it wasn't for me was when the lady that was training said, everything you have learned so far is just the basics, that you've not got into the main program. I said, no, these basics it's too much for me. I couldn't. So for you, did you have that experience? And how long do you think it takes to learn programming? Like, it's not. I understand the good side of it, which is you can solve problems. But if you can't figure things out, or if it's too difficult for you, how do you do that? So how was the experience for you?
Okay. So like I mentioned, I came from a zero background in sciences when I decided that I wanted to do programming. So I had a lot to learn. But one of the major things that, kept me going in that period was that I had interest in it. I've always had interest in anything that had to do with computers. And it was completely different, but I also had a bit of, statistic background. I studied economics. There's a lot of maths in economics, a lot of statistics, a lot of analysis. And, that also helped me because I had that background. I wasn't scared of the computational aspect of it. But when I started, it was really difficult. Okay, it got difficult towards the logic end of it. At the beginning, when I was learning HTML, CSS, I love anything that has to do with graphics, creativity. And so I thoroughly enjoyed it. There was a lot to learn and I was good at it. Like, it just came very easy to me. But when it came to things like JavaScript, like you mentioned, that has to do a lot more with logic, a lot more with solving problems, analysis. That was difficult for me. I'm a lady. There were times I actually cried. Like, I cried from being exhausted. Like, I couldn't solve the problem. I was spend hours, days, weeks on something that was supposed to be really simple. And I would second guess my decision to do this. I would like, am I sure this is what I want to do? But like I mentioned earlier, I had already decided that this was it. That I literally put all my eggs in this basket. So I felt like I had gone too deep to start changing my mind around it. And I just had to stay the course at that point. So it was difficult for me. Especially, it becomes easier once you get all the foundational knowledge. And once you learn, for instance, you learn one programming language, it's easier to move to all the other programming languages. So I also started with JavaScript, and it was difficult, but I had a community. Something that really helped me was I had a community, and I had this community when I was 7. I told you, I mentioned that I joined the subsidized NYSC training. So while I was there, I met a lot of people who were also into programming, and they also they put me into communities of developers. People were trying to learn. People were already very good in that area. I served in Kano in the north. So a lot of communities that were into software development in Kano, I joined them because I knew I needed people. I needed people that I could fall back to whenever I had issues. So I took advantage of that. I was constantly, reaching out to people. My instructor in the program that I joined, I got very close to him. I was always asking questions. He helped me join other communities, other programs as well. So one thing that I had good going for me was that I had that community. I had people that I could fall back on, ask questions whenever I was stuck. That really helped me because if I felt I couldn't do it anymore, I would just reach out to someone who would, put me through, help me. And then there were times where I was just, I was doing stuff without really understanding. Yes, I was doing stuff without really understanding, but I knew I just had to deliver. And so for me, the goal was to deliver whatever project I was working on, even though I don't completely understand it. So there were projects that had timelines. So I would work out, ask people for help. They would help out with it. And then after I've delivered on it, I'll come back and try to understand it. It's a very fast-paced world in software development. So I understood that I had to move as quickly as possible, even though I was trying to learn still.
So how long did it take you? How long do you think on the average for somebody to be like an intermediate? There's beginners, intermediate, and professional or advanced level. So how long do you think?
Yes.
How long did it take you to learn? To master?
For me to even call myself a beginner, it took me about the whole of service year, prior to service year, about 6 months, and then another 6 months. That's 2 years. So I usually tell people, give or take 2 years of consistency, especially if you're coming from a background that's, you have absolutely no knowledge of software engineering before you start learning. So I would tell people, give yourself 2 years, 2 years of consistency. That's every single day you're doing something with regards to programming, with regards to software engineering, with regards to coding every single day for about 2 years. And then you can comfortably call yourself a beginner, not even an intermediate. Yes. So it took me about 2 years, and I calculated from when I first started a software program up until when I got my first role as a software engineer.
So
that took me 2 years.
Okay. So let's talk about your journey to Andela, or your journey with Andela. So how did you find out about them? How did you get, onto their program? First, talk about the company. Talk about the company, what Andela does, then how you found out about them, then how you got started working with them, learning on them.
Okay, so Andela is a software engineering company. What they do is they provide software engineers to so their product is software engineers. They provide software engineers. They outsource them to companies that are in need of that opportunity. When they started, one of their major missions was to bridge the gap between talents and opportunities. So they felt there were a lot of talents in Africa specifically, and they wanted to bridge that gap between the talents and the opportunities available. So they started with training programs. They no longer do this, but when they started with programs where they train young and promising software developers, and then they train them to a level and then get them jobs, and eventually they outsource them to companies that they work from. So the model they had at the time was they train you, There's actually an amount that goes into that training. So that amount is deducted from your pay when you eventually get a job through them. But now they are mostly an outsourcing firm. So they source for developers all around Africa, and some, I think they are beyond Africa right now. So they source for developers all around the world, and then they outsource them to companies that they have partnered with.
Okay, they've
So
stopped the training bits.
yes, they no longer do that.
So do you
Yes,
know
but there are a number.
why they stopped? Do you have an
Um,
idea?
yes, I do have an idea. There was a lot of, it became a bit cost intensive for them at the time,
Who
and
was
that
funding?
model
Who was
was
funding it? Sorry, who was funding the
they,
training?
they had a lot of investors, but one of them that was Mark Zuckerberg through his wife's initiative. But there were a number of investors in the company at the time.
So did the investors pull out, or they just felt it wasn't viable anymore to train?
I'm not sure how many pulled out or if any pulled out,
Okay.
but I was aware that what they communicated to us at the time was that they needed to change the model because of cost effectiveness. They needed to be cost effective. As at then, they would usually mention to us that they are not yet a profit-making company. They've not yet broken even. I'm not sure about that position right now, but it was mostly a business decision at the time.
So you currently work at GitHub via Umbrella on contract basis. Where is GitHub located? What do they do, and what does your job entail?
Okay. GitHub is located in San Francisco. That's the headquarters, but it's a multinational. So they have offices in different other countries. I'm currently a technical support engineer. And what I do is I help them support their premium customers with issues using GitHub CI/CD products.
Okay, so you basically you work remotely, or do you work from?
Yep.
Okay, 100%
Yeah,
remote.
yes.
Okay. So like someone at your level, like how many years have you been a software developer, and how many years have you been working for them?
For my current role, I've been here for almost 4 years. By June, it will be 4 years. But I've been a software developer for about 6, going on 7 years now.
Wow, that's amazing. So for someone at your level, what is the income like a monthly income? What is it like?
If you're working for a multinational, I can't speak for working for a Nigerian company. But if you're working for a multinational, you earn somewhere an upwards of about $3,000 for a software developer. That's an intermediate to senior level.
Okay. So, but do Nigerian companies patronize software developers? And have you worked for any?
Yes, they do. Most of the products that banks use, their mobile apps, web apps, are built by Nigerians here as well. And I have worked for one as a front-end developer. I worked for a company called Prunedge as a contractor then for about 3 months, not for long though. Yeah, they do patronize software developers.
But they won't pay as much as the for multinationals, right?
In some cases, yes, they don't pay as much. So, like I said, I haven't really worked for a Nigerian company, so I can't really speak much to that.
That's understandable. So I used to hear that bank apps used to take like 6 years to build. Like so many programmers, can you talk a bit about that? How many programmers do you really need to solve a problem? Is it depending on the size of the problem of the company?
Um, yeah, it's dependent on a lot of factors, what products is being built, um, how much details they're putting into the product itself. But more often than not, it will take a team of an upwards of 10 people to build a product like a bank software, mobile app, or web app. And yeah, it's taking a team of like 10 upwards. And what's the other thing you asked? Sorry.
Like how?
How long it will take, right?
Yes, how long it take?
Yeah, it depends on, like I said, it depends on many factors. What the project is. Some companies will just want um minimum viable products. So, and you find that a lot of developers, when developing, they want to do continuous integration. So they start out giving the minimum viable product and then they build on it. So time to minimum viable products might be about a year, depending on how many people are working on the project. And then what happens eventually is that people keep building on it. There are newer features. Just like when Facebook started, it's not where it is right now, where it was some 10 years ago. So you find that over time, they keep improving on the product. So I think it's usually a long-term thing, but they usually start by pushing out a minimum viable product.
Yeah, you mentioned Facebook, which is quite interesting because for Facebook, that's a really big company. They have they have like close to 2 billion users, if not even more. So for them
Mhm.
to to maintain that kind of program, how many programmers do you think they would need, like an estimate, to be working on a daily basis?
Um, Thousands. I'm sure there are
Wow.
thousands of developers. It's not right now as it is now. They should have thousands of engineers working on it, diverse aspects of the product. There's so many aspects of Facebook. I think they even incorporated gaming. So they'll have, you know, engineers across diverse areas working on different features on the product. So I expect them to have, thousands of employees, and not just engineers. They would have, people doing PR, people in business, different areas. It's a very, very big company. But in terms of engineers, they'll have like in the hundreds, 500 engineers working on it. But I'm not sure, I can't say, but I'm sure they'll have lots of engineers working on it.
Wow, that's actually interesting. So what's programming language do you use, and what would you advise for someone that's starting up to learn? Because there are so many programming languages out there. So how does one know
Yeah.
what to start with?
Okay. So the two programming languages I use on a regular, or I've used a lot of, is JavaScript and Python. And for people who are starting out, what I personally would ask them to start with is JavaScript. And the reason is JavaScript can be used for front end, back end, can be used for scripting as well. So it's quite versatile, and you want something that can give you a general knowledge of programming when you start. And the good thing is, once you've learned a language, you can always learn another one a lot faster, because you're using basics, the core of programming, you would have learned it while learning the first language. So when you move on to other languages, you're just learning their syntax, and it's easy for you to learn at that stage. So personally, I usually would tell people to start with JavaScript, but it depends on what you want to do, what you want to build as well, because different languages would serve different functionalities in terms of what you want to build.
Have you had any difficult situation that you found really, really, hard to resolve, and how did you handle it, resolve it?
Um, on my day to day, I encounter difficult situations. And so for me, any software developer really, or any engineer, their day-to-day requires solving problems. So for me personally, what I do when I encounter issues, I take a break. And this is because you could find yourself, looking at the wrong thing for a very long time. But taking that break helps you come back with a renewed and refreshed perspective. So I usually would take a break, take an hour, move from that particular problem to something else. And then after a while, I'll come back. And by the time I look at it a second time, I would have a fresher perspective. Sometimes I could take a day even, leave the issue to the next day. It just helps me have a better perspective when I'm looking at it a second time. But generally, for problem solving, you just need to be able to think out of the box. And that's something that is a very good skill when you're trying to problem solve. You need to be able to think out of the box. And so I find myself doing that a lot.
So how does that affect like your timeline? I believe you'll be working with timelines, like you have the time to deliver the solution. So if you're
Yes.
encountering some difficulties, does it set you back?
Um, mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, it could set you back, but in my current role, um, I support customers. So if I'm dealing with a particular problem from a customer, I could, take some time. Depending on how urgent the issue is, I could take an hour. If I see that the issue is not as urgent and it's long term, I could take a day. But while I'm doing that, I'm focusing on something else. So there are other deliverables I can always focus on. But if something is really problematic, I find that taking a break from it, and before I even go ahead to take a break, it means that I've done lots of things. I've researched, I've, reached out to people that I need to reach out to. If I see that there's absolutely no way forward, then I usually will take a break, re-strategize. That break allows my brain to calm down. And by the time I'm coming back to it, I'm able to re-strategize about, you know, other ways, other perspective to tackle the issue. So in that process, it doesn't mean I'm stopping work. I could be focusing on something that's entirely, focus on something that's simpler or something that is easier to work on.
Okay, that's nice. So what is the next level for you for your career, and what do you need to take you to the next level?
Um, so I'm big on growth, and I think that's something that is very essential in my field for any programming, software, AI, technology field. The field is constantly growing. And so I am big on growth. And one of the things I want to do next is move into a much more managerial role. That's in the nearest future anyway. It's not like my ultimate goal, but the next step, like you mentioned, is to move into a more managerial role. And for me, that entails learning. So I just keep learning. I'm constantly doing courses, certification. So I would continue on that path.
So you mentioned AI, and like I've seen a lot of AI software. Like I use one myself that helps to retouch
Mhm,
pictures. So what it does is it retouches, most of the things we used to take time to do. It retouches pretty fast because it kind of detects the blemishes on the face, and you can save your settings. Then when you apply to a different face, it's has a way of identifying, where the blemishes are, which would be, on a different location. And I was really amazed by
mhm,
it. So you could do like a 1 week job, you could do it in say 5 minutes. So is
mhm,
AI a
mhm.
threat to regular programming, or is it something that can be combined, or is it a different field entirely that you have to like move away from or learn separately to get into?
So there are two aspects to it. You are either building AI or using AI. So depending on where you're at, you find that most people want to use AI, and you find that people who are increasingly using AI think that it's eventually would, take over their jobs or their roles. But I see AI as an enhancer, and what that does is helps you function better, helps you do things faster. You know, that's how I see it, because at the bone of everything, if you're not, AI is not, AI is built to enhance what you already have, like what you already know. So I'll give an example in terms of programming. There are a lot of AI tools that, can help you program. So GitHub also has one called Copilot. And with Copilot, you know, you can write a starting line of code and then it just completes it. But you find that because of where we are also with AI, in a couple of years, I'm sure it would have even become a lot more efficient than it is right now. But given where we are right now, what it does, it helps you enhance what you already know and you're building on. So it builds on what you know. So I don't see it as a threat. Instead, I see it as something that enhances what you already know, and makes you more efficient, makes you more productive, do a lot in lesser time. But in terms of threats, I think creativity still lies within us humans. We literally built AI. So I think we are still the ones behind ideas, and then AI helps us, um, reach those ideas faster and more efficiently. That's my own perspective of how AI, comes into play right now.
Okay. So if you were not a software developer, what else would you be doing?
Um, I like to say that I'm a creative at heart, so I love anything that has to do with creativity. I'll probably be in some creativity field, interior decor, graphic design. I love anything that has to do with design, that has to do with, coordinating colors, bringing out ideas. And, I think I'll be in one of those fields. I'll probably still be using technology even to enhance whatever it is I'm doing. But yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. So what does success mean to you?
So success to me is basically fulfillment. And I would say fulfillment is anything that gives me joy and a way to keep growing. So I'm big on growth. And whenever I see that there's no way forward in anything I'm doing, then I stop being fulfilled. So as long as what I'm doing at any given point or any aspect of my life gives me joy, and I see a path to grow, then I consider it successful. So in my current career, I consider it successful because I have grown, and there's still lots of diverse paths for growth in it. And I love what I'm doing. I love it because I'm able to help developers all around the world, do better at their jobs. And that's what GitHub as a platform is. Helps collaboration, helps developers build amazing products, equipping them with all the tools that they need to achieve it. So yes, as long as I'm happy, or rather, as long as I have joy, and I see a path to keep growing in that endeavor, then I consider it successful.
Yeah, that's good to know. Over the years, I've realized that in my working career, working with different people, I've realized that when people don't make money over time, even if they get fulfillment and joy from the job they do, they eventually leave it because there are bills, and the bills are screaming loud as you get older. So,
Mhm.
is it possible to have fulfillment when you're not earning enough money from what you love to pay your bills? Or do you have to,
Mhm.
I'm looking at like a happy medium or something. Because I see a lot of people working and they don't love their jobs. They hate Mondays. They love Fridays, TGIF and all that. And the people that love Mondays don't earn enough money to stay in the game that they love, or to stay in what they love doing. So what's your perspective on that? Do you have to stay, continue doing what you love, even if you're not making money and hope for a brighter future? Or, what do you think?
Money is very essential. So money does contribute to, your happiness in one way or another. So I would say if you're doing something that you really love and it's not providing the amount of money you need. It could be one of two things. It could be that you are in the early stages and what you really require in that phase is patience. So like I mentioned, when I see a growth path, there are people who do things that can't even see any way forward, but they keep at it. But I would advise when you're doing something that you don't see a way forward from, then you should look for something else. But if you see that there's actually a way to grow, to increase your earnings in that part, so it might be a game of patience that you need to be patient in. And then for those that, are doing stuff they don't love and because they are earning a lot from it, it's a survival mechanism. But I would also suggest, or I would advise in that scenario that, find something that actually keeps you going. Because at the end of the day, no matter how much you earn, if you wake up one day and don't feel fulfilled around what you're doing, I don't think that money will be sufficient to solve that need for fulfillment. Because eventually it will come. It might not happen right now, but eventually there'll be a stage you get to where you'd actually feel like something is missing. So I think it's all about balance. There's need for money. So at every time we should always reevaluate where we are at. And that's something I always do. I reevaluate my positions regularly. I look at what I'm earning and the amount of fulfillment I'm getting from what I'm doing. And I look for ways to, balance it out. If there's something else I need to be learning on the side to move me forward, I find ways to keep learning. If there's something else I need to do side also to help me while I'm, figuring out my paths in that role, I find ways to also do it. So I think it's just people should constantly reevaluate where they are at, what's important to them is very necessary. So what could be important to me might not be important to you. So everybody should reevaluate what's important to them and find ways to reach their goals and still make the best of it in terms of earning as well.
Thank you very much. Lastly, when I watch The Matrix, I see codes on the screen, and when people looking at the codes can actually see something else, like what it translates to. Is that how coding is? Is that how you see codes? Because I see code as headache. I can't understand. So when you look at, like in the movie in the Matrix, you see the Matrix. Is that how coding is to you? When you see code, you know what it means. You've not seen the Matrix.
I
Okay.
No, I haven't. I've tried to see it of recent, but I didn't complete
Oh,
it.
it's a nice movie.
But yes, I understand what you're talking about. I see it in a lot of movies. And most times those things are just generated. Some if for a programmer, if you look at some of them, you find out that they are actually just gibberish and they're just putting angles, things that don't actually mean anything. But yes, when I started out, whenever I saw those long lines of stuff there, it's English, but there are lots of commas, angle brackets, a lot of other punctuation marks in it. And so it's difficult to understand. But as soon as I learned those syntax, it became easy to read. I can see stuff and understand what each line is doing. It's easier to understand. It's just like reading a language you don't understand. It would always seem like gibberish. But as soon as you understand it, it becomes easier to look at. So yeah.
Thank you for coming on the Mac blog. Wish you all the best in all your endeavors, future endeavors.
Thank you.
And for staying in there, for keeping on, and for continuing what you're doing, even when you have your down moments and you felt like probably leaving or giving up. Yeah, I want to commend you. And So keep it up, keep up the good work, and all the best.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.